Hello and welcome to the Tifo Football podcast. I'm JJ Bull. There's no Joe Devine. He's dead. He's not dead. He's on holiday. It's Christmas time. He hasn't succumbed to the horrible virus. This has started weirdly. This is our video podcast because we managed to make a grave error earlier on the Zoom where we didn't record individually the screens. And as you can see on the screens, I'm joined by Seb Stafford Blower, live in Germany.
Hello. Hello. JJ Bull the Bullard. Hello.
You were angry when we recorded the original intro, weren't you?
Yeah, I've had a really testing morning and I took it out on YouTube, which is fair. That's what co-workers are for. Yeah.
But we made you happy, and Alex, it was a good time, wasn't it?
Oh, so meaningful.
We talked about a lot of things. Oh boy, did we talk about some things like Leeds, Manchester City, and
we did some Tottenham.
Yep, Tottenham and Liverpool.
Yeah.
We argued about Andy Robertson for, with bits that might have to be bleeped out at different points. We did some swearing. Yeah.
You didn't like Andy Robertson
You
either.
did some swearing on that segment.
We might have to kind of JJ's face got all angry and upset when I started talking. I could see it.
You can't diss Robbo. It doesn't happen. But do you know what you also can't diss? The Athletic.
Oh, seamless.
And if you go to theathletic.com/Tifo, well, you'll see exactly why you can't diss it, because it's got the best sports writing and reporting you'll ever see.
Hey, you know what you should do also? Like if you're running short of Christmas presents and you're shopping for someone that, not that you don't like, but someone that you haven't given a lot of thought to, it's a great late present.
Like. It is a good present, though.
It's a great present. Like
weird caveat.
No, because it's one of those presents which it seems like you've thought about it a lot, but actually you haven't at all. So give the Athletic as a Christmas present.
You don't need to think about it because you should instinctively recognise the overwhelming quality.
And
it should be reflexive.
Well, if you want to find out what the quality is like by going to theathletic.com/Tifo, you'll get a 30-day free trial. Which is good, and you should do that.
That's good.
Now, yes. So that's what we're doing for this video intro. We're going to come in halfway through part of one of the conversations because we made a mistake, but that's for you to deal with and us to enjoy. Other way around. So without further ado, I'll leave you in the warm arms and the cool eyes of Jack Frost. Is he the snowman? No, Frosty the Snowman. Goodbye. Newcastle 0-4 Manchester City. Oh, boy, are Newcastle in trouble. You've written here, wonderfully bad defending for the first goal, which is a nice phrase because wonderfully bad shouldn't make sense, but it does. It's perfect. What happened?
Yeah. What happened was that a ball was played through to Cancelo, who stretched, and it actually reminded me massively of a Kai Havertz assist for Bayer Leverkusen. Leverkusen.
Bayer Leverkusen.
It's like Laser Quest, but in North Germany. And he sort of stretched and volleyed it back, and Kieran Clark thought that Dubravka was going to take it. Dubravka thought, I think correctly, that Kieran Clark should have taken responsibility. Neither of them did, and it wasn't like it was massively fizzed across or anything. It was just a decent ball into a decent area, and then someone, I can't remember who, but one of Man City's less tall people jumped in and scored. And you just kind of look at it and think, Eddie Howe is facing a very difficult task there, even if they've got a shed load of money to spend. If you're not going to be able to attract the right quality of players who are thinking, do we really want to go to a relegation scrap in the Northeast for a club where there are, shall we say, PR issues surrounding some of the things going on there? And then you look at that, and Howe's not like a great defensive coach. That's not what he's particularly good at sorting out. So it just seems like it was symptomatic of a lot of the issues. I mean, City were great, but Newcastle cannot defend.
Is Howe for now, Seb?
Howe is for now. Also for now might be Dan Ashworth. So according to reports by David Ornstein, Brighton have given permission for Newcastle to discuss the sporting director role with Dan Ashworth, which feels strange on a number of levels. Firstly, because Ashworth has a great job at Brighton and is doing a great job at Brighton. but also because the transfer window opens in 11 days' time, 12 days' time. And that's not an ideal moment to appoint a sporting director during a season when you might get relegated, because you'd expect all of your strategy to be bound up in whoever that person is, because that would quite literally be their job should they arrive. So, pretty worrying on the pitch. How is for now, but Newcastle in the Premier League might be for later. I don't know. It doesn't look great.
I mean, Ashworth's a very smart appointment should that happen.
Who is Dan Ashworth for people who might not be aware of him?
So,
in harmony now, please. In harmony.
Sorry.
No, would Seb, do you want
go,
to
Alex.
sing the
Sorry.
treble line or the bass line?
I will. No, I will. I'll give you a sort of a baritone. Like Dan Ashworth is Dan Ashworth was the architect of England DNA, which was much maligned, but actually very, very successsul.
Like the mad scientist in Jurassic Park.
A little bit, but without getting eaten at the end. Oh no, he doesn't get eaten, does he? I'm thinking of what's the name of the guy that steals the test tube, runs away in the car, and then gets killed by that inky.
The guy with the glasses.
That's Newman from Seinfeld.
Him.
Yeah.
Okay. I was thinking of him, and Dan Ashworth is not like that guy at all. He is. I've forgotten what the question was.
Did Dan Ashworth get eaten by what's the name of the dinosaur with the big...
the Velociraptor.
No.
It's categorically not a Velociraptor. Yeah.
No, and also that's actually, this is another good fact about Jurassic Park for you. The Velociraptor was meant to be Deinonychus or Deinonychus, because raptors are actually very small. They're really small, and Deinonychus, or whatever they're called, were much taller. But raptors had the claw on their foot, which made them scarier.
There's a challenge in Civ 6 where if you build an archaeological museum in the same city as an amber mine, it says what could possibly go wrong. Oh, and there has to be a zoo as well. Yeah,
that's good.
I did that one a while ago.
So Dan
I feel
Ashworth,
like at this point Joe would somehow kind of talk about Rocket League. I don't know enough about Rocket League to kind of draw that segue, but that's what he'd do. It's like, in Rocket League when you're doing a 360-degree flip off the corner of the cage and you're driving into your football and scoring a goal, and it's a bit like that. So Dan Ashworth, I find it really odd because, like, I would imagine that for a sporting director, the most important thing at a club is trust, followed closely behind by harmony and cohesion with a head coach. Seems to have all of those things. Everything's going very well at Brighton, and we have no indication of whether he'd accept Newcastle's offer, but it seems odd to entertain it beyond the kind of the financial value of it, just because it's still lacking in all the infrastructure you need to maximise your own performance as a sporting director. Newcastle's training facilities are dreadful. They are a couple of years at least away from being Premier League standard. Their recruiting pool is, I don't think it, at this point, is much stronger than Brighton's because of the threat of relegation. Financial muscle aside.
Brighton have got Graham Potter, which is a massive draw because Brighton's focus very correctly and intelligently is on younger players that they can develop, and they have a real nose for sniffing out good prospects, particularly I think in midfield. And so if you're a young player in Europe looking at that development model and the opportunity to work with Potter and looking at some of the other transfers they've made, you're going to feel that's a really good fit. That's not Ashworth can't pick up his strategy that works fantastically at Brighton, like you say, in concert with a good relationship with Tony Bloom and a good relationship with Graham Potter. Transport that same approach to Newcastle, because Newcastle have a different set of problems and a different set of priorities.
I also feel like I'm always very, very suspicious when a club appoints a manager without having a sporting director in situ, and then brings in a sporting director to work with someone that they haven't appointed. It always feels like that makes the relationship a lot more short term. Like the job of a sporting director is to not necessarily appoint, but to recommend and promote a manager for a job. And that wouldn't be the case. And I have no idea about the synergies between Eddie Howe and Dan Ashworth. I don't know that they know each other at all well, or have ever worked together before. But strange one. It just should have been the other way around. It feels very, very late in the day to be making this, and it seems symptomatic of everything that's happened post takeover.
Well, I mean, the things that you see off the pitch in Newcastle seem to be replicated on it at the moment. It's a bit of disarray. They don't really look like they are doing very well, particularly. Should they have had a penalty when Ederson flew out and took out Ryan Fraser?
Yeah, pretty obviously. I mean, if
I don't think they should.
Why not?
Because he wasn't getting near the ball. The play had gone. It would continued elsewhere.
Yeah, but I think you can. I think if he doesn't get taken out, he's able to put pressure on a defender who is not even in control of the ball themselves. He's very close to being able to make that pressure successfully, and he's impeded by it's no different from two players chasing a ball and a third player like pulling on the shirt of them. You would give a free kick for that, wouldn't you? So what's the difference? Just because it's in the penalty area,
I wonder.
And it's not. He's not even slightly impeded. He is completely taken off his feet.
Yes, but
it's a penalty.
Do you think the referee's thinking that's not really going to make a difference, is it?
I can completely understand why he hasn't given it. I think it is a penalty, but like it's just enough of a loophole for a referee not to bother with it, just because it's. I suppose it's a bit of a weird one because
just not bother with it. It's like, it's
well,
Christmas.
because a little bit Christmas, charitable, but also JJ's got a point. Like it has no impact on what happens next at all. And I also entirely understand the argument for a penalty, and I wouldn't have been that worked up either way. A lot of people seemingly disagree about that, but it's like it doesn't change anything. And I feel it's a little bit like
you can't
okay, so
that it doesn't change anything.
Okay, but think of it like this.
Specious argument, like, this thing that couldn't have been allowed to happen because of what happened first might not have been relevant. Like,
no, because that's the basis for so many refereeing decisions. Like, what's pertinent in a phase of play, like offside, but also within a penalty decision. Like, if you look at okay, so think about the penalties that are given when there's sort of jostling in the box, when there's shirt pulling. Like, there's always shirt pulling. There's pretty much shirt pulling and obstruction and fouls in every kind of man marking situation. Mm-hmm. But the one that is the offence which warrants a penalty is the one which has which prevents a forward from making a header or getting to the ball, and so it is a judgment call on what's likely to happen. And it's a little bit like this reminded me of when a forward gets to the ball a second ahead of a defender, boots off for a goal kick, but then gets scythed down once the ball's in row F, and then a penalty is given. It's just like it's not a penalty because I think I'm with JJ. Sorry, Alex. I can feel your disappointment. It's just like it's not worth the outrage that social media decided. No, but you think that about life. You don't think anything's worth like a response or an emotion or some things are worth breaking down and having a meltdown over, Alex. It's just the reality of it. But this is not one of them.
I agree. I mean, I don't know. I do wonder this, and obviously this is a weekend for weird refereeing decisions.
For sure. Yeah.
I do kind of. I get why people get annoyed. I do, but I also feel like if it's done, it's done. Why spend the next 5 hours working yourself into a lather over it? Just go and have a walk. Eat a banana. It's fine.
Play Civilization 6.
Talk about it on a podcast. Okay. Sure. Other things on this notes, because there's only like 3 games we talk about. We should focus more.
Slow everything down a little bit.
Yeah. Joelon, he's garbage, isn't he? But you've written that he's not as bad as he seems to be.
Well, yeah. So, and thank you for paraphrasing what I actually wrote.
You wrote that he was shit.
No, I said not being shit. Well, that's a double bleep. No, look, the problem with Joelon is that when he was bought from Hoffenheim, his role at Hoffenheim was very much as a kind of second striker. He was a link player. He was somebody who was looking to play in somebody ahead of him or spread the play wide to wing-backs. He would pick up the ball, turn and carry it slightly. He was not ever a centre-forward. And yet he was brought in and then used by Steve Bruce largely as a centre forward. So obviously he's not going to appear to be the player that he was, that he was at Hoffenheim, and the reason that he was bought from Hoffenheim was his good performances there, because he was being used in the wrong role. Here, he was more of a, I don't want to call him a 10 because he's not like a 10, but he's a sort of a shadow striker.
He's a 4 out of 10.
Harsh, but fair. But there were a few moments where, because if you've got Callum Wilson playing ahead of you, and Callum Wilson's quick and he's good at bursting past the shoulder of the last defender, you want somebody who can pick the ball up, drive forwards like Saint-Maximin can also do off the left-hand side, create that issue where defenders are thinking, do I step up to this player to close them down, or do I drop back and back and back with the forward who's going to try and push beyond that? And Joelon had a few moments where he was able to do that. Obviously, those moments were limited because he's playing against a really, really good midfield, and they had very little time on the ball generally, and City have good enough defenders that they can make those judgments between them, and one steps up and one falls back. But it just felt like that was a means of progression that Newcastle had by using Joelon correctly in a way that we didn't see under Steve Bruce. But yes, he's still not amazing.
Are you sitting on a staircase?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Tottenham 2 to Liverpool. This was good. I enjoyed this game. This was like basketball.
Fun.
Yeah, it happened on Sunday. Liverpool were missing some key players because they had fallen foul to the vile ways of the coronavirus, and probably some other reasons as well. So written as it's very much a second string. It's quite a good second string they put out there.
Yeah, pretty useful second string. So kind of a little bit weak in the middle. No Virgil van Dijk at the back, but a really strong forward line, which caused Tottenham all sorts of problems. Apart from Mohamed Salah, who was really well contained by Ryan Sessegnon. Played very, very well. Feels like this was sort of the moment when Sessegnon's Tottenham career began. He was excellent.
That's interesting with that, because to me, he's not a wing back or a left back or anything like that. He is. So when he was playing well at Fulham, he was a left-sided forward on a 3. Yeah. And what he would do is he's not particularly rapid or anything like that. He just would arrive at the right place at the right time and finish off moves like a tap-in merchant. He's really good at it.
He's he was sort of I characterised him. A lot of people sort of mischaracterised him as a sort of a new Gareth Bale, which is about as far from what he is as possible, because Sessegnon he's a smart player. You can actually, if you watch him and if you sit close enough to the touchline, particularly when he was at Fulham and Craven Cottage and when he was so close, you can kind of see him thinking his way through games and his sort of positioning and the passes he gives. Like he also, like he was I think Jukanovic would use him sometimes from the right of a front 3 as well. Like he would rotate him in games, and he just he knew where to be at exactly the right moment. But I was having a conversation with. Sorry, Alex, go on.
So I was going to say, I think we did a video on him like way back, and it was really interesting to see how many of his goals started with runs from sort of maybe the edge of the penalty area on the left-hand side, but cut very diagonally in, and he would finish them around the 6-yard box. And it wasn't because of pace, and it wasn't because of the directness of his running necessarily. Like you say, it was timing that brought him into very close-in positions at exactly the right moment, which does strike me as purely a product of intelligence in terms of possession.
Yeah, it's funny also because I watched him play quite a lot in the England age group teams as he came up, and he was capable there of being really destructive and of being that kind of running past player type of attacker, good finisher too. But then in neither case, was he ever really associated with quality defending. And I was having a conversation with Kevin Hatchett, who is a commentator who does a lot of commentary, particularly in German football, English language commentary for German football, works for TalkSport. Good man, Kev. He was talking about how much Sessegnon improved defensively while he was at Hoffenheim, because there's quite a great emphasis on that side of his game. And that certainly showed, because I thought that I think Salah's played a lot of football lately, and he looks a little bit jaded, but he certainly didn't really do anything against Spurs, which is, I think, the first time I've said that in quite a long time. So credit to Ryan Sessegnon. But it was, It was fun. Oh, JJ, I'm going to interrupt this to bring you some red-hot Scottish football news. Sean Maloney is the new manager of Hibs.
That's good.
That's exciting. What does that mean?
Well, they got rid of...
What are Hibs? What is a Hibs?
Well, I mean, it should go Rangers, Celtic, and then really it should be one of Aberdeen or Hearts. Probably should be third. Aberdeen are way off it. Hearts are much better at the moment under Robbie Nielsen. Hibs just got rid of Jack Ross of the brutal sacking like a week before the cup final.
Is that former Sunderland Jack Ross?
Yeah, that guy. I think he's really good. I really rate him as a manager, and he was doing well with him. But they just, there's not much you can really do. Like, sure enough, you expect him to finish third, whatever, but you can only finish third at the end of the season. You can't finish third now. So they got rid of Jack Ross, which I think would imply that, I'm just making this up, that the chairman probably was looking for a reason to get rid of Jack Ross, and from whenever he could, because imagine he'd won the cup final, right? You can't really fire a manager straight after that. That makes you look stupid, but you can fire him before. They didn't win. They lost 2-1 to Celtic on the weekend, by the way. They won the League Cup. You couldn't have guessed that would happen. And so Sean Maloney, who's been working under Roberto Martinez at various clubs, I think, actually, especially Belgium.
He was, he was an assistant coach with the Belgian national team.
Yeah.
Was Sean Maloney a sort of like wide inside forward for Celtic?
Yes.
Same guy.
Yeah, and for Wigan, do you remember the goal he scored against Wigan? Beat Man United 1-0 in during the season when they ended up getting relegated, maybe the season before. And Sean Maloney scored a fantastic goal, cutting in from the left, bending in at the far post. Good player, Sean Maloney.
I don't remember that.
No, he was
He's only 38, which
I
is.
do remember. I remember Aberdeen
Your-
beating Real Madrid 2-1.
Oh, in the 1983 Cup Winners' Cup final against Real Madrid.
17th of May, I believe.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Halcyon days.
it was. It was a good day to be anyone.
It's good year.
And
Can I? Sean Maloney, but also relating to Sean Maloney, Spurs. So
yes.
One of the topics that came out of that game was Dele Alli's performance, which is really, really interesting because I think both under Jose Mourinho and briefly under Nuno Espirito Santo, Dele Alli has been sort of converted into this probably more advanced of a midfield three, and he's been kind of tried as a bit of a shuttler, which is strange because it's not. The role he played for Mauricio Pochettino was typically tied to wherever Harry Kane was on the pitch. The closer those two players were together to each other, even the better they tended to perform. And on Sunday, he played on the right of a front three, and it was his best performance in a really, really long time. I don't think it's going to be enough to change his career's trajectory at Spurs. I still expect that he'll leave in January. Might change the type of club that are interested in him. But it's kind of nice, when a player's obviously been through a pretty rough time form-wise, and you see him have a pretty decent game, a nice sort of 7.5 out of 10 game, get a nice round of applause when he comes off. It was just kind of a feel-good moment. I felt like if that's the last time Dele Alli is seen playing for Tottenham, that's a nice way to end, rather than kind of as the guy that was hacking about against Mura in the UEFA conference nonsense.
He missed two massive chances, didn't he?
Well, he missed. Well, no, I felt like the one he cut back for Harry Kane, I felt like that was more of a Kane miss.
I thought
contact was a little bit.
I thought the pass was nowhere near what it needed to be. I think it needed to be hit along the ground. And
I agree. Yeah,
it was a
no, I don't
pass
disagree.
Or bad execution, I would have said.
I think it wasn't the greatest pass. I still think Kane should score. The second one, the one in the first half, probably should score. I think it's more just a really, really good bit of goalkeeping. He should put it away clearly, but I think I don't want to be the guy that kind of I don't want to be the guy that overlooks the save, because I think that's a brilliant bit of goalkeeping from Alisson. But he should score.
Yeah, if he hits it hard,
still played well though.
If he puts it in a different angle, he doesn't save it.
He telegraphs it as well. You can see by his body shape where he's going to put it. And if you watch the replay, you can see that Alisson has already moved to that side before he's made contact, and he could do more to disguise the shot. But still, good save. Great save. Still a fine save. Also, can we talk about Andy Robertson getting sent off? I feel like I've waited for this for a really, really long time because he's got away with so much.
Absolutely. And we should talk about this after a short break. And we're back. Now, I believe you were desperate to talk about Andrew Robertson, my hero, my captain, my everything. Andy
Robertson's a snide little fucker. And
wow.
he's an excellent player. But over the course of his career, if you look back, he has got away with it a lot. I mean, he has had that red card in the post for quite a long time, and it's part of what makes him a good player. He's aggravating, and he is aggressive, and he is someone that gets under an opponent's skin, also under an opposing crowd's skin. And that's part of it. Players like this are very, very important to the game. You've got to have a player that your own fans love and everybody else hates. But that's a red card, and should have had a red card in this game a couple of years ago for his tackle on Jafik Tanganga. There's a moment in a game against Everton where he, I forget who it was, elbows someone on the floor. He does this, and that's alongside all the wonderful things he does, and good. Glad to see him get sent off. Not to say, of course, that Harry Kane shouldn't have been red carded too, because ludicrous decision not to send him off. And I feel like this is part of everybody's frustration with VAR. It's like you have two incidents within a game that are very, very clear cut, are very easy to make. They're both red cards. They both shouldn't really need VAR to make the red cards. And yet the application of VAR is different for both of them, and that seems to affect the outcome in both cases. It's just weird, and it's also, you know, what's really strange. Like the PGMOL has this habit when something like this happens of briefing a journalist with some kind of weird rule minutiae that they suddenly make everybody aware of a little bit of, you know, a little bit of a loophole that didn't exist before. So they have told somebody that apparently the reason that Kane escaped the red card was that Robertson jumped in the challenge before Kane made contact. And so by their weird, twisted logic, that somehow made him the protagonist, or like something that doesn't make sense. It's just like, guys, what is the worst that could happen just by holding your hands up and going, got this one wrong? There's more credibility in doing that than coming up with this weird convoluted Watergate scandal type cover up where you're saying, oh no, it's not actually a mistake, and they do it every single time. Every single time.
Had Robertson not jumped out of the way of that tackle, you seen it coming, he would have been snapped into little bits, and they wouldn't have been able to volley Royale into the stands like he did for the red card.
Exactly that. Like, you have to, and I think this is a lot of fans are rightly angry about it because one, there's that common sense argument, and there's that bit in the rules about, you know, part of the conditions for issuing a red card are, is this a tackle that's endangering an opponent? And clearly Kane's was, because Robertson could have been seriously hurt. And that's also the reason why he was sent off late, because the tackle itself was fine. It's the force of the tackle that makes it a red card. It's completely unnecessary.
It's quite funny. Though,
and you'll go on, jump in and defend your little hero. Go on.
It's quite funny. Like,
do you know what it reminded me of? Is there was a thing earlier in the season. I can't remember which side it was. It was maybe someone like Swindon, and a guy went to take a free kick, and the opponent was kind of dallying, and so instead of taking the free kick, the guy just cleared him out. Yeah, it was Robertson-esque, and
Well,
we used to we had a coach at school who said to us, you know, when you're trying to take a free kick and an opponent just stands in front of you to stop it, his advice was, okay, when that happens, just clean him out, just as hard as you possibly can. Because he didn't, I don't think he knew the rules actually, and he kind of treated it as like, when an opponent does that, it becomes like a hall pass to like violently assault somebody, which obviously it's not. And so this situation occurred, and you can guess the rest of the story, but it didn't end well for the player on our side that did that.
You glorifying violence today, so angry today.
Yeah.
It's a strange.
I was up very, very late doing the live stream. I've had not very much sleep. One of the cats decided to walk on my head at about 4 o'clock this morning, which woke you up, as it will do when something with claws walks across your face.
Alex, the tactical battle in this game was an interesting one. What do you make of what Conte's done with Spurs?
I think it's very impressive. I think for me the tactical side of Conte is, and I don't say this disparagingly, it is relatively straightforward in the sense that we know what Conte teams are going to try to do. So there are some little jazzy bits like Ben Davies underlapping runs, almost got a goal. Well, I mean, it was a decent shooting opportunity off that. You know that midfield are going to alternate. One will drop back into the kind of 4 or 6 position, depending on which numbering system you use, and their shape and their pattern is really starting to take shape and be very, very clear to an observer, which is what you'd expect from a Conte side. I think what's particularly impressive is the way that some of these players are being, their performances are so quickly being elevated from what they had been before. So Winks dropping off and playing that role. Skip's had a good couple of games. As Seb mentioned earlier, Dele Alli in a different kind of thing to what we had seen before, where he was much more of a kind of bitey, shuttley type of runner under Mourinho. Now there's a little bit more craft to it. So I think, Conte is obviously, it's a work in progress, and he's going to want better players. But the fact that players can come into this lineup and immediately look better than they've looked over the last sort of 18 months without a huge amount of effort.
Is this not what Spurs do now? They get a new manager and they're quite good for about a month, and then they all just...
Yeah, but this is Conte. Conte is not,
So
but there is a quality that he is going to be able to sustain and improve, because he's really...
I would say the difference is that you can see a plan. I think under Mourinho, the plan was very, very basic. It worked very, very briefly and dramatically at times, but you could always see the rocky foundations. Like if you looked beneath the kind of the scoreline. With Nuno Espirito Santo, I don't think it was that subtle. Like they got away with a couple of 1-0 wins, and then they were dreadful ever after. Here you can kind of see the flaws clearly, and you can see the areas of the team which desperately need investment. And I think they were pretty fortunate on Sunday to get away with a draw. Because if Robertson doesn't make that tackle, then I think Liverpool probably go on and win the game. And also the Alisson mistake was pretty fortuitous. But you can see the basis for something, and that's the big difference between what came before.
That's what I mean about patterns. Yeah. If you watch Spurs now, you can see how the 5 block is formed. You can see the alternating runs from midfield. You can see the formation of the rhombus at the back, and then the wing backs pushing up and players staggering between the lines. Like it's.
I also like Alex. Also the kind of the long ball out of defence facility. Like they've got that kind of. It's a set move. They work it back most often to Dyer, and then they spring one of most likely Son or one of the wing backs over the top. Yeah. And it probably requires, like, Eric Dyer is not Toby Alderweireld in terms of his long range distribution, but he did a pretty decent job of it on Sunday. And that's one of those things that they've been missing. Like with Mourinho, by design, Mourinho wants players to improvise in attack. He wants players to kind of become situationally wise, whereas Conte wants a bit more control. Conte is a bit more puppet master-like with his players. And you saw that. And I think like when a team is fragile, I think it's a great benefit to have those, because it can kind of fall back into those little routines without having to kind of rely on confidence. They know what to do. And that makes me feel a bit more secure as a supporter.
It's like when a family sends their difficult child to military school.
Exactly that.
They don't want to go. They don't want to go, but they come back and they're ready to...
Yeah, but like it versus sending like their difficult child to like some kind of creative arts, theatre, drama place
that's
where
just go and do film.
Yeah, it could work for some people, but it's a bit more of a risk. Like you send your kid to military school, you have a fairly good idea of what's coming back. You send your kid off to drama school, and something
stress disorder, presumably.
Possibly, but you're still certain in the outcome. And like, you know, the kid that comes back from theatre school, maybe super talented, but you're not quite sure of the direction. And that felt like, I mean, I suppose that's a little bit of a kind of a general criticism of Mourinho's football. Like it works for some players, doesn't with others.
Well, do you know who else is post-traumatic stress disorder? Andrew Robertson, after that horror challenge from brave Sir Harry Kane. Disgraceful. Hey, was Liverpool's high line a thing they should have kept up for this entire game? Because to me it looked like Conte knew they could get the ball over the top, they could run past them, through them.
Really weird.
It helps them squeeze the game, right? So they can push up and they can keep the ball in the other half. But they kept, and I can't work out where they kept losing the ball, like where they were losing it to be counter-attacked so quickly.
Sort of the gap in front of the. I felt like the midfield's pressing up was disjointed, and so it was possible for Spurs to, if Spurs got the ball in the sort of 10 yards in front of the penalty area, the midfield weren't close enough to them to prevent that initial release pass, but they were close enough that there was a gap between them and the two centre-backs. And if you could chip the ball over into that gap, then that was particularly for Son to be able to run through. I think that the one... Son had that really good chance that ended up as a one-on-one, but he then overkicked it and Alisson gathered. That came from exactly that kind of situation. And it's partly because the Liverpool's central midfielder was that very young person whose name I can't remember.
Morton.
Yeah, and
I thought he played quite well.
Like he played quite well, but he's not as bitey. He's not as he didn't know.
He's not Jordan Henderson
as well where to be, whether it was to push up or to fall back. And that's, if that's Fabinho there, you don't have to have so much of a worry. But that's
what's really interesting. Like when Liverpool would turn the ball over in a Spurs channel, there'd usually be an outball down the line, usually Son or Kane. Then from there, the ball would be shuffled in field to a Winks or an Ndombele, and then Spurs would have a numerical mismatch over the other side. So there's it felt like there was a little bit of a spacing problem in the Liverpool midfield, and also I don't think they dealt particularly well with the wing backs. Like Royale is not a particularly aggressive wing back. I mean, he's being asked to play that role, but I think he's more of a defensive player actually. Sessegnon kind of the same, like he's a bit more balanced, but and yet sort of you had this problem whereby it wasn't necessarily that Liverpool's fullbacks were being caught up the pitch. It was just that this timing of Spurs' movement forward was just and I suppose that's where you miss a Henderson. Like I think Henderson's greatest attribute has always been to kind of like fill the gaps that develop from when Liverpool are attacking with the ball, or to kind of to identify the spots of weakness within his own side. You take that out, and you take out Fabinho as well, and all of a sudden, when the ball's with players like Son and Kane and Ndombele who know how to use it, Winks is the same. Like you're a little bit vulnerable, and it felt like a pretty good example of just how important the midfield balance can actually be, and how important like the Henderson-like qualities are to a team like Liverpool.
Well, this is the thing.
Liverpool, right? Did I say? How important they are to the Liverpool.
The Liverpool.
Yeah.
Well, the Jurgen Klopp, I think the commentators were saying this is the kind of game that he really likes, the kind of high action, high octane thrills of this end-to-end game. And the thing with the high line is that to play the way he wants to play and press the way he wants to press, you have to play that line. I don't know. We're talking about like Bielsa at Leeds, we'll come to in a second. It's like you don't want to change the way you play because it's going to inhibit the way you play just to match the opposition. And I'm not trying to wind you up, but it's only Spurs. So like, what you think? Like the problem they've got. I mean, this should be a team that Liverpool should be able to beat, even with a weaker team. But equally, tactically, look at Son as your main threat up front, and Kane's been a lot further forward now as well. Like he's finally got shots on goal from inside the box, which is good.
Yeah.
I don't know whether should Klopp be adapting his tactics in these sorts of games.
I wouldn't say adapting. Like I would always say that like Liverpool against a team like Spurs, Liverpool shouldn't be adapting around that side. They should be trying to enforce themselves on that kind of team and just sort of pinpoint, like focusing themselves on their weaknesses. But like I would have thought that at least part of the conversation ahead of the game, and I do accept that like Liverpool have all kinds of shortages and the match preparation was badly disrupted. Of course it was. But the one thing that you want to take away from Spurs, a team that cannot really at the moment create many chances off the front foot, they're not a team that's particularly comfortable in control of the ball because they don't have a midfield combination that they are settled on. Their first choices were all unavailable. So surely the thing that you take away is Kane and Son's ability to kind of create the combinations which can spring one of them behind the defence. Also, that Eric Dyer thing that we talked about earlier. Eric Dyer is not playing those passes with any great disguise, and yet 3 or 4 times, like it was just as simple as knocking the ball over the top of the defence. And one of the things, amongst his many complaints about the refereeing, which were all valid after the game, Klopp was quite sort of disparaging and said, "Oh yeah, all Tottenham did was just kick it as far as possible and then run after it." And it's like, okay, we'll stop it then.
It kind of worked,
like because it kind of worked, and it's just like I felt like I don't feel like Liverpool should have adapted round Spurs, but I felt like maybe they could have won that game with a little bit of humility at some point, because all they had to do was control the ball, and the way of possession. Spurs' defense is so fragile, and the issues in front of that defense in the midfield are so obvious that you have 55-60% of the ball in the right area of the pitch, you are going to score goals, because look at who's playing up front for you. And yet it was as if, rather than, they did the opposite of that thing, like a kind of, right, well, we want Spurs to come on to us because, I don't know, very, very weird. So
there was one moment where Kanate really stepped up and won a very, very aggressive header. I can't remember who the ball was going to, but it was really noticeable that was the only time that stuck out in my mind of one of Liverpool's defenders really aggressively closing the space up and trying to get ahead and win the ball before it got to that kind of slightly dangerous area where Spurs could then build play from on the counter. And I just was a bit surprised that Liverpool didn't maybe defend that space a bit more aggressively also.
Yeah, it was really odd. Also, like Son has had coronavirus recently, and I think you could see that he wasn't really quite fit yesterday. He had to play, and played okay, but it was just a I don't know. It's very hard to explain. It was as if I feel like Spurs got away with it. I feel like Spurs were given opportunities in the game that. And I kept expecting these doors to be shut. So I think we all saw the first half an hour and the kind of the volume of chances that Spurs created and missed. And you thought, well, at some point there's going to be a rejig and the adjustments are going to be made to prevent any of these avenues. And it's going to be back to the same old plodding Tottenham who have the ball, lose it and concede goals. And that never happened. And I found that, injury issues aside, quite odd, quite hard to explain.
Well, speaking of injury issues, I don't really care about the League Cup, but we've got written down here that there are some games coming up. But will they be coming up? Because they might have a little break with scheduling. And you know what? That's also quite boring as well, isn't it? All the scheduling and things like that. So let's ignore it and pretend the coronavirus doesn't exist. And instead move on to a team. Leeds 1-4, Arsenal. My God, they're in trouble. Leeds.
Yeah. Hey, so let's plug the excellent Phil Hay, because you wrote a great article about this.
He's so nice in real life as well.
He's a really, really nice bloke, yeah. And very difficult, obviously, to watch what's happening to Leeds at the moment. And I thought he made a really good point in his article, which is that when you marry Leeds' injury issues, which are really substantial. So, like, for instance, Robin Koch had to play against Arsenal, having not played since August because of the... Llorente was ruled out in the morning of the game, I think. So they have crushing issues everywhere. They've been without Calvin Phillips for a while now. He is the kind of the personality of their midfield. But he said that when you marry these injury issues up with Marcelo Bielsa's refusal to be anything other than Marcelo Bielsa and to make no deference to a situation, in this instance, being reluctant to move away from kind of his man marking, you're going to have problems. And it's entirely logical, because if you think about Leeds' success, at least in promotion in their first Premier League season, they have the kind of physical superiority over most opponents. And with the effects of coronavirus and squad shortages and their desperate need for reinforcements in January, that physical superiority has vanished. And the effect and result is kind of what happened against Arsenal, which is just that they look entirely broken. They didn't play in a way which made any kind of acknowledgement of their situation, which was really scary. Like it's so fundamentalist. And I love Marcelo Bielsa. He's a fascinating guy. But this is the Bielsa flaw. And it's going to sound sad. Like we will talk about Arsenal being good, because I thought they were. But it was also really easy for them to build a 3-0 lead.
Well, on Bielsa's tactics, let's go into what man-oriented marking is and why that's been an issue for them. I think you're best for this, Alex.
So I mean, essentially, mostly teams will, particularly higher up the pitch, will mark zonally. So players will have a rough position and they orientate themselves kind of slightly in relation to where people are, but also where the ball is. But they're looking to shut down passing lanes, whether they're pressing or blocking. Bielsa has this thing where you're basically picking up whoever's closest to you and then sticking with them, and you have to hand that player over once they pass a certain distance away so that it doesn't get so pulled out of shape. But because they have a spare man at the back, they tend to kind of compensate for that. What it means, this is a terrible explanation, but what it means is that it's basically, if you have a lot of rotations in your opposition build-up, it's very, very easy to pull Leeds, I don't want to say out of shape, because they actually kind of don't have a shape to start with. Their shape is mirroring the opposition's shape, but you can then create massive holes on the pitch that you can pull, attack through with your own players.
Yeah.
When it works because they have the spare man who is able to cover the space, and that's often what Ben White did for them last season. Koch is also good at that. Cooper is also quite good at that. But also it's because
season before last for Ben White.
Yes. But it's also because they have the physicality of Phillips, who can kind of buzz around and shut down passing angles and put the opposition under pressure. And if the opposition are worried about the press and the degree of physicality that Leeds are using to impose on themselves, they have less time to think about orchestrating those patterns and rotations that pull Leeds out of shape in their man marking system. So it's a kind of vicious circle for Leeds, because they can't do the pattern that they know works for them if the way that they also defend otherwise isn't functioning properly. And I get...
Yeah, but they're missing players, like they are. Their squad's not already, it's not very good, I would have said. Like,
it's not a massive... And this is, again, the problem with Bielsa, and I get what Phil's saying in terms of moving away from the man marking system, and that's the logical response. But Bielsa takes such a long time to drill his players into the way that he wants them to play, which is basically unlike almost any other team. I mean, Atalanta kind of do it a little bit, but it's not, you can't have degrees of uniqueness, that's stupid, but it's relatively unique. And so to assume that you can just abandon it and go back, these are players who have been coached consistently for 2.5 years to play in a very rigid and particular way. You can't just go, oh well, we're not going to do that today. It doesn't.
But Alex,
work.
like when you
that's
when
the
you kind of
that
consider,
Bielsa makes for his own back.
It feels like when you have any system which relies on markers passing over to each other, and you add in the uncertainty of team selection, which is in this case as severe as players dropping out 4 hours before kickoff, like. This is the natural result, like 7 goals against Man City, 4 against Arsenal.
This is the problem with highly ornate tactical systems that are... So the obvious analogue here is Sheffield United in the season they got relegated. Not because the defensive system was the same, but because the way that Sheffield United played was an absolutely brilliant compensation by Chris Wilder and Alan Knill for the deficiencies in their squad and the way that also teams tended to defend against them in League One. But as soon as you have injury issues to key players, in this instance the wide centre-backs for Sheffield United, the system just doesn't work, because you can't adapt a system that is so rigidly coached because it's the way that you do stuff, but is also incredibly reliant on certain players or a certain level of cohesion. And so these two teams are having the same kind of systemic problem, albeit their tactical systems are totally different.
Yes, sounds nice. Arsenal then.
Yeah. Hey, they're good, aren't they?
Hey, I'll tell you something. That Martinelli's all right. My podcast questions are weird today. I'm just saying a thing and then stopping talking. I'm not even asking you anything.
The Arteta, like the 3 youngest average Premier League sides named this season have all been named by Arteta. I think that's right.
Well, he's doing like a football manager thing where he's buying all young kids to bring them through, but he's having to play them now.
He's giving them an opportunity. Yeah, and it's. I mean, obviously, some of those young kids that are there already and have been for a while, like Smith Rowe and Saka, but the way that Tavares, for example, has been brought into that as a a purchase. That's worked really, really well. Ramsdale's worked really, really well, and Ramsdale is young for a top level goalkeeper. It just seems like Arsenal.
Tavares is a weird one. Like I don't see the Tavares thing. Like I agree with everything else. Tavares just seems like a problem in the making.
I mean, there's something there, but he just needs to learn a little bit. Yeah.
It's like
I mean,
Lokonga will make the occasional
Lokonga I like.
decision,
I think he's a good player.
But he has a range of passing which is really good. He's working well in that role. He's he makes mistakes. I think we talked maybe 2 weeks ago in a podcast about how he wasn't dropping off into the correct areas and so on. But Arteta is persisting with these young players and giving them opportunities, and by and large, for now, it's working. But it's Arsenal, so in 2 weeks'
It's
time,
definitely working against teams who are decimated by injury.
yes.
That's the thing with Arsenal. I still can't figure it out. Like,
No.
I can't figure it out because I see that some of the problems that I was talking about before, like the donut and all that sort of stuff, where there's no central striker. They still do that sometimes. They're still very slow and build up from the back, but they are, like, the numbers are showing that they're actually doing quite well. XG and underlying stuff shows they're a little bit inconsistent, so they're not quite there. But that's what happens with young players and a team being formed. They could be on the way to doing something quite good. And like, think about this, right?
James York put out a graphic using StatsBomb numbers today on Twitter, and it was basically to do with like XG differentials in games, and you see that some teams are relatively tight to their own median. There's not a great deal of variation in results, but Arsenal are spectacularly all over the shop. Sometimes they're doing fantastically, and other times they're just less consistent, I think, than most other teams, and that is a facet of the way he's getting them to play, I think. Or the selection.
It feels like they still don't. Arsenal still don't know what they want to be. I don't think there's like a.
They want to be
their
good
performances.
at football, Seb.
Well, they want to be that, yeah, but they also seem like the Arsenal performances are pegged around at the moment. Performances of individual players too. Like every Arsenal win at the moment is kind of sponsored by somebody. Like Leeds, Martinelli, who I thought was great. Smith Rowe's been very, very important. Saka's been important. Lacazette has had a couple of good games recently. But it feels like there isn't there isn't an end game in mind at the moment. It's just a kind of an open evolution, if that makes sense, which makes it very, very interesting. But it feels also like there are still important steps to take. Like I think recruitment is still half finished. I think that I still think some of the players in this team are not good enough to go where Arsenal want to go long term. I think Xhaka is still a problem defensively. The Aubameyang situation is, at the moment, it's a relief because it feels like it's been resolved, but it's a long way from that because it's a very, very high earner, a very influential person who has been kind of ostracized from the group. It's a weird situation. It feels like a decision that Arteta has wanted to make and needed the reason to make it, if that makes sense. Not to be too conspiratorial, but then that's kind of a little negative that has to be resolved. You feel like that's Arsenal, and one of the reasons that they are... it seems one of the reasons why they are a little bit inconsistent is absolutely fundamentally because they're young, and that's the habit of young players, but also because there is still so much uncertainty in so many different areas. And like, it's not probably a coincidence that they tend to be as good as the teams they face are bad. Like, with all due respect, they beat a very average Southampton at home, a devastated Leeds away, but then also...
That was good.
West Ham, yeah, that's fair. The West Ham win was good. But then there was a worrying moment in the Leeds game where they had the game won. Rafinha scored his penalty. Great penalty, by the way. Lovely penalty. But then all of a sudden, Leeds were the better team for a little bit, which is kind of weird. I know that's a game state thing, but it was still, you're in such control of this game, and all of a sudden, another goal, and what happens, and it didn't come. And
but that's the AI. That's the
easily.
AI doing that to make sure that
the catch up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Sky Sports. Yeah, I know. I bet. That's scripting, damn it.
That's what that is. And that's real, by the way. Scripting's real. That exists in games. I've been told reliably that's a real thing they put into these football games.
You've told me consistently that you
and
believe
I'll tell
in
you
it,
again, and again and again.
Yeah,
because I've been saying
yeah.
it for years. We used to call it pro evil luck. But Alex, you're looking as though you don't know what I'm talking about.
I've got no idea what you're talking about.
You know when you play...
I need to break for 2 minutes.
Well, that's fine, because I think we're actually at the end of the podcast.
Oh, what a relief.
We're sure.
I think we've covered everything we needed to. I think we've all had a lovely time, especially Seb, who's a lot happier now than he was.
Hey, I was grumpy this morning, and I am sorry for that. But I am happier now. You two have cheered me up. I saw Alex laugh. Alex, when you laugh, you laugh with your mouth, but not your eyes. It's quite a funny thing. It's like
It
a
lights up the
ha ha ha
camera.
ha.
It glows. Like
It made my Monday.
A reindeer's nose, and the reindeer are coming. They're coming to get you on the weekend, aren't they? So everyone, I hope you enjoy your Christmases.
Happy Christmas.
Yes.
The reindeers are coming to get you.
They're coming to get you. They won't stop for anyone. There's nothing you can do. Board up your doors. Lock your windows. The reindeers will come. They're quite big reindeer. Anyway, this probably won't happen. But thank you for listening to the podcast. What am we doing? Oh, yes, we're ending it. That's it. Thank you, Alex Stewart.
Thank you, JJ.
You're welcome. Thank you, Seb.
Thank you, JJ Bull the Bullard.
Okay.
A little bit Joe Devine.
This is what Joe does. All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. Have a lovely Christmas. And yeah, thank you for listening. Again, I'll say it again and again and again. Goodbye.